Welcome to part 4 of making this needle felted husky. In this portion of the tutorial, we're going to work on all the finishing details. So that'll include finishing the facial features and the ears and the finishing touches on the nose, and of course adding all of the coat coloring to the husky. I'm going to start by painting the backside of these acrylic safety eyes. I used a mix of a light blue color and white. You do not have to use these exact paints at all, and it doesn't have to be any particular type, just any acrylic paint. And depending on the dog that you're making, the eyes might not even be this color, so you don't have to have these colors at all. This dog had very pale blue eyes, almost white looking, so that's why I did a very pale blue, but you might have a darker blue, or you might have brown eyes. It just depends on whatever it is that you are making. While those are drying, I'm going to mark out the pattern of this exact husky that I'm making. I just took a Sharpie to mark out the different patches of color. Along his back, I'm going to put this dark charcoal, and it is a nice mix of grays, which I think is really helpful for getting the look of a dog that has sort of an agouti type fur, where the underneath or the undercoat has a lighter color than the tips of the hair. So I'm using this along the darker parts of the dog, and then I'll use black anywhere I needed to give a shadowy appearance where the fur is kind of bunching up a little bit. So anywhere there's creases, there's a much darker look to the fur. For this dog's coat colors, I'm using 4 total colors. I'm using black and white, and I'm using the dark gray, the charcoal, and a lighter gray. The exact one that I'm using is no longer available, but I did put a link in the video description to an assortment of grays that would include something very similar to this, or you can just choose your own. I put multiple links to different sellers on Etsy that I would recommend. And also, if you're making a slightly different animal and it doesn't even have these colors, then you'll just choose your own colors that you think would work. But overall, I'm just using 4 shades, 2 grays and black and white. And then just a reminder, I did mention it in one of the earlier portions of the tutorial, I'm planning to get the furry, fluffy look on this dog by reverse felting. So I really am trying to get a very firm, tight felt on the dog, and I'm going to put several layers of color because this dog does have the kind of cream color showing through on most of the colored patches of his body. And the paint has dried on the eyes, so I'm going to go ahead and glue those in place with some tacky glue. And again, you just want to make sure that both eyes are in the same plane and that they're both at the same angle. You don't want one like tilted up and the other tilted down. So I'm just kind of checking over, looking at it from different angles, looking at it from the top and the sides, and making sure that the eyes are in the right plane. I'm going to take some of the white wool and start building up the brows of the dog. And you definitely want to take wool and build up around the eyes so that the eyes aren't just sticking out of the face. You want them to look like they are set inside the skull. So in a sense, you're sort of building up this skull region that fits around the eye sockets and the muscles and everything that would be around the eyes. I'm sorry this gets out of view sometimes. Sometimes when I'm working on it, I just pull it closer so I can see what I'm doing. But I'm just taking the wool and still building up around the eyes. So on the top and the bottom, just trying to build it up so that the eyes are set inside the head. Next, I'm going to take some of the black wool and just take thin amounts and poke it all along the edges of the eye to create the dark outline that this dog has around its eyes. I don't want it to be too thick of a line, so I'll just keep felting it until it looks the right thickness and the right eye shape. So you kind of have to look at your reference and see how the dog's eyes are. This one has a little bit of, I guess like an almond shape. I don't know if that's the right description, but basically off of the corners of his eyes, there was a little more black definition that kind of had an angle to it. And then definitely along the inner portion of the eye, it was filled in with black from even the side view. You could see a lot of the black outlining of his eyes. He has very dramatic eyes. So this is what I have so far for the eyes in terms of where I have the black and how thick I have it. The next thing that I'm going to do is take some of the lighter gray color and I'm going to soften the top part of the eye so that it looks a little more relaxed. And this is almost kind of like just adding some upper eyelid and eyelashes with this lighter gray color. I'm going to take some of the charcoal gray like I have on the back and I'm going to put that on the forehead and start marking out some of the dog's pattern. I'm going to take some of the white wool and start building up his fluffy little cheeks. So I'm kind of taking a little pillow of the white wool that I've rolled and I'm going to place it at a bit of an angle on the side of his face behind the eye, and I'm going to have to blend that basically from the muzzle and the area under the eye and just create this little wedge shape that he has on his little puffy cheeks. And I'll take thin little pieces of the white to just blend that so that it looks like a smooth transition, and I'm using the fine point needle for that. And for most of the detail, the finishing details, this would be the needle to use. I'm taking some of the charcoal gray and I'm building up the back part of the fluffy cheeks, and this will be the part that smooths into the head and the neck. And I am also, this is how I'm finishing building up the bulk on this dog, is with the colored wools, so that he'll have a thick layer of the colored wools that I can then pull the cream color through that's kind of in his undercoat. So when we do the reverse felting, it will pull that undercoat through and give it that look that's multicolored. So here is the comparison of the side that's not yet puffed out and the one that I am working on, fluffing out his little cheeks. Then I added another pillow of the white wool, like right along the throat under the jaw, to start thickening that. And then I'm not sure what happened, but the video was not recording. So I'm including still shots at this point when I realized it wasn't recording of where I'm at right now. I've added more color to the dog and kind of made the right side of the cheeks match the left side. And then another thing that I did, which is super frustrating that I did not get it recorded, is I took some acrylic paint and I added a little bit of a pinkish gray color that I mixed some pink and gray to the nose in the center. This dog had a little bit of a pink color, so I will put that in the video description how I did this part. And I still need to add quite a bit of thickness to this dog. So what I'm doing is in the areas where his cream undercoat shows through, I'm building up with cream and then layering again with the gray colors. So building up with cream on the sides to kind of give his rib cage more thickness to it, and also the shoulder muscles, and then covering with the light gray again. And it's a lot of just layering that I was doing with the grays and the cream, especially on the sides and the shoulders where a lot of his cream undercoat shows through. And I pretty much just repeat that process everywhere that I'm building up the bulk. I use the cream, which is the core wool, build up the bulk, and then cover it with the grays. One exception would be his belly or his legs or his face or chest, because that's all actually white fur. There's still a few more areas that I'll end up thickening on this dog, but it's pretty close to the thickness that I want. And definitely note that around the neck it's been thickened, and the shoulders and the chest area. Then I just continue to make sure that all the shaping is how I want it and that the wool is densely felted so that it'll be ready to be reverse felted and have the inner part pulled out. So still just densely felting it. Then I'm going to take the black wool and I'm taking a small portion that I'm going to then flatten out and fold over on itself and create a triangle shape for the ears. And then once I get one ear how I want it, I just repeat the process and make sure that the two ears match. So I overlay them over one another and just make sure it's the same. I'm going to add a little bit of this flesh tone wool for the inner part of the ear. Whenever you add these lighter colors to this side of the ear, and it's a dark colored ear, the back side is likely to have little bits of that lighter color poke through, which you don't want in the end. So once I do all this lighter wool, I will flip it over and re-add some black to the back side. This white wool that I'm adding, I'm trying to have it sort of have loose ends, so I'm securing it sort of down the middle and then letting the two ends hang off so that it leaves a really furry look. I'm using this little matte cleaner tool to brush out that white that I have on there so that it all is going in the same direction. And I do have a link to this in the video description. So here I'm just covering up the white that poked through with some more black wool. And now I am going to cut off all those excess parts where the wool is too long and just have it be a fluffy white fur that shows on the inside of the ear. And I'm going to trim it till it is the right shape that you see for the outline. So on this dog, when you see it from the front, there is a certain shape with the black outline of the ear. And so I'm fluffing up that black part now with this matte cleaner tool so that the black fur is also pointed in the right direction. I'm just trimming some of the white and some of the black, and I'm going to work with it until I get the shape that I want. And it is not a perfectly even black outline. When you look at the dog, there's a thicker amount in the inner portion of the ear, and then there's a more narrow part of black kind of in this part right here where I was trimming, which is more on the outer portion. So again, I would just really say look at the specific dog you're making as a reference and work from there regarding how thick you want that border to appear from the front. And when the ear is attached to the dog, it's going to have just a slight curvature that I'll attach it so it's not just perfectly straight, but a little bit of a curve. So here I'm just checking how I want it to fit on the dog's head. And then I'm going to take the felting pen and just indent the portion where the ear is going to be a little bit more. And you can see I'm kind of pinching the ear into a little bit of a curved shape. So I took some straight pins and pinned that ear basically where I wanted it. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other ear. It was, again, totally out of view. So was the other. That's why that part's clipped out, but you can kind of see this one. But I'm just pinning them where I want them to be. And once they're, basically in place, I'll start felting it so that the wool starts to hold. And I'm just checking to make sure that it's in the right places. So the inner part of the ears, I was attaching basically in line with the inner part of the eyes. And then the outer part is slightly further back on the head and just, I guess in line with the outer outline of that definition around his eye. So beyond the eye, but a little bit in line with that dark mark. I took the pins out and I'm just going to securely felt the ears in place. So this is what I have so far in terms of where the ears are attached, in case you just want to compare and just see from different angles. So here I'm working on that shape of the outline of the ear where the black is that I was mentioning before. Certain parts of the outline should be thinner and then certain parts should be thicker. So like on this inner part where I want it thicker, sort of tucking the white more inward so that more of the black outline is revealed. And the head of this husky is his darkest part. So I am going to take now the black wool and start layering over on the top with the black. So here is the final look of the black that I put on the head. And now I'm going to start taking a real thin strip of black wool and outlining the mouth. Here I'm taking just a teeny bit of black wool and I'm just widening the black mark on the corner of the mouth. I feel like in the very, very corner edges of the mouth, it's just a little bit thicker black looking. And then I'm taking more white and building up the cheekbone under the eye just to be a little bit thicker. Again, I'm so sorry that so much of that is not really in view in the camera. I'm not aware of it while I'm doing it, and then it's too late because it's already done. But what I'm doing right here is actually working on thickening the muzzle at the part that's right above where the mouth opens. And I will do more of this, which I do not have on film, at the very end. Just thickening, just like I did there, because it needs to be a little bit wider right above the line of the mouth. And so I don't realize it till later, and then I correct that because it's still a little too thin in the muzzle. Now I'm just going to do some more of that same building up of the bulk, and I actually shift the shoulders even a little bit higher in this part with the core wool, and then re-mark out the black crease in the fur. But again, it was core wool, then gray wool, then a little more of the black wool. This is all black wool that I'm putting in those same lines that I had marked out earlier. And I'm adding some more black wool where there's basically like a shadow that's created because of the way this dog's fur is, that you can see the light colored base coat through some of the darker tipped fur. So in the creases, there's just a darker look. Then I'm just tidying up the face a little bit. I noticed there was a lot of little scraggly bits of wool fiber sticking out. So I'm just trimming that so that he doesn't have any obnoxiously long pieces of fur sticking out where he would have short fur, like around his eyes and muzzle. Here I'm going to add back a little bit more of that fluffy white wool for the ear, and it's really on the inner portion of the ear, and I'm attaching it more onto the head so that it sort of looks like there's a fold in the ear. I'm just accentuating that sort of curvature of the ear using the white wool. So rather than it being really attached to that ear that I have built, I'm attaching this more to his head. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the black just on top of that, especially in the front where the ear has more of like a curvature. I'm going to put some black that I'm attaching to the head and then just sort of blend that into the black of the ear so that it looks a little more curved. Here I decide I really need to add more thickness to his rib cage and chest and belly area. So this is actually just core wool. So I've covered up the white wool that I was putting there with some core wool, added some more of the gray, and then I'll lay white back down the center. This next needle that I'm using is the green reverse felting needle, and I'm pulling a little bit more of the white through on those corners just to give it a nice blended look, and then trimming it down. And then here I'm going to use that reverse felting needle to pull more white out on this corner edge where the outline of black should be thinner. Now I'm going to use something different. I'm going to use these pit pens, which I do have a link to in the video description. And I'm going to add, this is a very light gray color. This is India ink, so it's going to be nice and permanent and not smeary. And I'm going to add this just for some definition around the muzzle. Now I took a slightly darker gray and I'm filling in sort of the center part of that. And then right here, right above the eyes, I'm creating a line that is just to serve as like a differentiation between the eyelid and his eyelashes. And these pens also, I'm going to use them to accentuate the shaping around the eyes and that little pattern that goes from the tear duct onto the muzzle. But always start with the lightest gray, and then you can move up to a darker gray and see how it's applying to the wool so that you don't end up with something way too dark. Now I'm reverse felting a little bit of the white through here just to kind of puff that out in a spot that I felt like it didn't have enough of the white. I'm really looking at the facial markings at this point and trying to make sure that I have the details correct. Here I'm taking the lightest gray again, and I'm just extending that shaded part on the top of the nose where the dog's skin is visible. And this one is a flesh-toned pit pen, and I'm using that to just add back a little bit of the flesh tone that was getting lost that I had added with the wool. And it's this one's a very light color. And I also will put a link to these flesh-toned markers in the video description. Here I'm going to take a different reverse needle. It's the exact same as the other green reverse needle, but this one has two needles fused together. You don't have to use that. A single needle would also work. It's just I happened to buy like the full set of these reverse needles for this project. So it's just this double one is working quickly to pull back some of that fur and give it a more fluffy look. So now for the really fun part, I'm going to start really fluffing up the fur on this dog. So right now I'm just kind of creating kind of a blend where his head goes from being really dark black to more of the grayish color. And I'm using this little tool to comb upward and then just making sure everything's attached still firmly, that I didn't pull too much out, but kind of just blending that area. And also fluffing out this wool. And right here I decided to put a little bit more of that charcoal wool, and I just stick it kind of in the back where the black and the light gray were meeting, and I felt like the black was going down a little too far for how the dog's markings were supposed to be, so just as a blending and also to extend up the gray a little higher. So just felting and then brushing and felting and brushing, and in this part of the body the fur sort of comes out in this direction, so I'm brushing it that way and it comes back up in this direction. So right along the edge of those cheeks it sort of forms a peak. So from the front I'll just brush backward, and then from the back I'm brushing forward. And once I have enough fur that's kind of fluffed out, I will trim it to be the shape that the dog's head looks. which it's sort of an angled shape coming from the corner of the ear. It goes outward and then it'll come back inward. And now I'm going to take this quad point reverse felting needle. It's got 4 needles that reverse felt, and I'm just going to go all around the whole body of the dog and just pull straight outward and get it a very fuzzy, furry appearance. So I'll pull straight through even where the black is, and it's going to pull that light color through and give it a blended look, and just overall give the dog the fluffy look that I want it to have. This is actually pretty fun, but it does, some parts really kind of require a fair amount of tension to pull forward, which is good. So you want to make sure that your project is already densely felted enough that when you go to pull the wool out, you're not just unraveling the whole thing. It should just be pulling some of those fibers through the top. So this is what I end up with for the body. Now that I've reverse felted all of the body, excluding the legs and feet and face, but the rest of it I've reverse felted. Here I'm using the reverse needle to add a little bit of fuzziness to the face. I will trim this down, you don't want it to be super long there, but the path between the eyes and the ears on most dogs and cats is a little bit more sparse in the hair, so it usually looks a little bit lighter anyway. And then I will take it a little bit to fluff up without stabbing quite as deep, because I don't want to pull the light color through here on the black part, and then also on the brows, just to make sure it looks more like fur and less like a smooth piece of wool. But I'll trim it so that it is not so wild and crazy looking. It should just be short but fur looking. Here I'm just fluffing out the cheeks a little bit more with that reverse needle, just to give it a little more fullness, and then I'll trim it so the shape stays correct. So I'm doing a lot of reverse felting, trimming, brushing, reverse felting, just sort of a process till I get the shape that I want with the fur. And anywhere that I have those creases that I kind of marked out with the black wool, I will, on a lot of those, trim it a little bit shorter than on the rest of the body, just to accentuate the fact that there's like a crease there where the dog, it's bending, and that really fluffy fur kind of makes a crease. Next, I take a pet grooming brush that I have just specifically for needle felting, and I am using it to get the fibers all aligned so that it looks like the fur is all growing in the same direction. Instead of kind of looking like a fuzzy mess, I want it to look like all the fur is going in a uniform direction. And then again, I'm just trimming it so that it smooths out the shaping of the dog. Now this dog is pretty much done, so I am gonna keep doing some trimming, just any slight little bits that need to be trimmed, and if I see any little bits that I want to reverse felt a little more to make it more fluffy, then I do that. But it's just little finishing touches at this point. I'm going to show you various angles in case you're trying to compare to this exact husky that I'm making, just so that you can see what I have so far. And really focus on the mouth. The mouth on this husky, I really felt it is too narrow in the muzzle still, especially in the lower part, like the part right where the black line of the mouth is visible. It's just a little too narrow. So what I did that is not shown on the camera was widen that a little bit further. So this is what I actually ended up with. This is the final version of the husky. So if you compare the mouth in this video to what was just a few seconds back, you can see the difference. I added a little bit more white just above the mouth line, just to widen it a little. And then I took the Pitt pen markers and very carefully just added tiny dots of color for the whisker marks along the muzzle part and the top of the nose. So I will also include a bunch of still shots so you can compare. I did also add a little tuft of black fur on the right ear because this specific dog had that very unique little tuft of fur. And then here are some just zoomed in shots of where I put the whisker marks. And this is the first needle felted animal that I have ever applied a fixative to. So once I had this finished, I did spray on a fixative to keep the fur held in place, but I did it very, very lightly and from at least a foot away, and I covered the eyes before I sprayed it, and I will include a link to that in the video description. I hope that this video was helpful, despite the parts where either I was needle felting off screen or I didn't hit record. I hope I was able to at least talk you through it enough that it was useful in your needle felting project. And I wish you the very best. Thank you so much for watching.